Hello, Plum Market. Hello.
Hello.
Unmute myself. I am muted.
Okay. Hold on. I'm putting up the. Good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Good.
10-4.
Let me get myself organized here. Did you have a fruitful work day today?
Yeah, I did a few, was able to achieve a few things, but we stay inside. It's pretty depressing outside. So it's crazy. There's a lot to do, lots of details still. You would think that things would be slowing down a bit, and actually there's
but not.
No, not at all.
It's just different, and it's really the unknown. Right now, I think all of us have to be very nimble. There's no template for what's happening right now, I think, regardless of where you're working. And,
that's right.
And this is a highlight for us. So thank you for being willing to do this, Laurent.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely. I mean, and we were able to set this up pretty quickly, actually.
I'm shocked. I mean, actually, we did it in less than a week, and here we are. So bravo to us. I was just remembering. Oh, there she is. Hello.
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 I've been a sommelier, I will tell you, for longer than I'm going to admit, but I was lucky enough to fall in love. My first wine I fell in love with was white Burgundy. So there is a very soft spot in my heart for the name of your family, because anyone could really afford Pouligny Montrachet, in the early 80s when I started. But I have to tell you, I tasted just 2 minutes ago, and the minerality is spectacular. So,
thank you. Thank you.
I have it in magnums behind me. So
I have all 4 of them in front of me. I don't know what I'm going to do with them afterwards, but bravo. It's just wonderful. And I forgive my ignorance. I hadn't tasted it before we picked it out for this event.
And Bata, we make very little. It's a very small production. We have a tiny piece of Bata. We also buy a small quantity, like a barrel, and it's the blend. So it's very small, but it's delicious.
Oh, it's very. I mean, I'm tasting it side by side with the Saint Laurent. The Saint Laurent to me is dangerous because it's so easy.
It's addictive.
I taste that wine, I go, if people think they don't like Chardonnay, they haven't met this wine. So
that's the way I joke all the time. I think that Bob is following, but I tend to say to the people, if you don't like Chardonnay, drink white Burgundy.
Oh, absolutely. Well said. I'm going to steal that. That's a T-shirt. Absolutely.
How is the light? How is the light for me? Because it's dark outside, so I just realized that I have no light. Is it okay?
It's you look slightly pale. Do you have an overhead light that you can turn on, or a side light? Actually, I read that recently. Something you have that. Good.
I just put lights because it was very dark. Is it better?
I think you look fine. The background is slightly dark, and you're highlighted.
I'm trying to get mine a little closer, maybe sort of, because I have a window on one side, and
I can get the screen a bit closer.
I don't think your screen needs to be closer. If anything, you can back off from it slightly. That's better. If you back away from it slightly. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah. And do I look okay? Is this lighting all right?
Yes.
Good.
Perfectly fine. And Veronique, by the way, Aurore says hello.
Thank you.
Aurore just walked in the office, and I said, I'm going to start the call.
And I have a message from Bob. The light should be right in front of your face, behind the camera.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Can I try it?
He told me recently to put it next to me, but what do I know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's try this.
Let's try this.
Bob, is it okay with me? No, you can only reply through, yes, okay, good.
Yeah. And Q&A, let's see, I gotta get
How's
my.
that?
Can you see this? That's actually, I think, a little better.
Okay. I'll do the same with this one because I have two lights.
That's good. You're using your phone or your computer?
My computer.
Computer.
Oh no, my phone would be a mess.
All of our phones are a mess. So the natural light, oh, it's dark outside, right? Because what?
Yeah, because it's 10 p.m. So it's totally dark. So I grabbed lights quickly. So
thank you for staying up late.
no, 10 is perfect. 11:30, I wasn't sure that I would be awake, but no, 10 p.m. is no problem.
No, some people have been doing virtual tasting with European friends on Saturdays and Sundays, so they can do them, more naturally for you. And as we're chatting, I've been told by Lindley that attendees are joining in, so that's good. Welcome, whoever's joining us. And we'll just give it a few more minutes before we start, I think. But before I forget to do this, thank you from my heart for being willing to do this to the two of you.
You are very welcome.
Pleasure. Cheers.
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 Cheers to the folks I can't see at the moment who are beginning to join us. But I have to tell you, the Chablis is a lovely revelation. And it's very different than the Mâconnais wine, so I'm pleased.
Which one do you have? Because we do produce two Chablis. There is one that said exclusively Chablis on the label, and the other one says Réserve de Vaudon.
No, this just says Drouhin, and it's Drouhin, correct?
It's Domaine Drouhin. Yes.
Drouhin, Vaudon, 2018 Chablis, Joseph Drouhin.
Okay.
But I mean, in America, we always say Drouhin, right? But it's really Drouhin. So forget, but as they say, a rose by any other name, correct?
Yes, that's right. Rose by any other name. Yeah. But no matter how you pronounce it, it's not changing the wine anyway. So.
No, thank you for feeling that way. Some people don't have a sense of humor about things like that. So we are pushing 4 o'clock. So I think we can start in just a couple of minutes, and I'm checking to see if I can see our Q&A. Yes.
I was testing the Q&A. Hello from Norville. I have the Saint-Véran. Ah, wow. Sounds good.
So we're sounding good. Okay. Well, I think maybe just another minute, if you don't mind. And we didn't review. I don't mind if people hear this as we're chatting, but we didn't review this particularly. But I'm sure you'll touch a little bit on when we get to Oregon on Dundee Hills versus Eola Amity, because that's something that really interests people like me, sommelier types. I don't know if I have to pay the attention to this or not. I read about it, but I haven't experienced it. And the two wines are very different indeed. And also, if you would be kind enough to define what the Drouhin style is, I'd be very curious at some point if you could define
Absolutely.
that. Absolutely.
Yes, whenever you want, you ask me, and yes.
Okay. I think we can go ahead and start. Welcome, everyone, to a very special tasting. I'm Madeleine Truffaut with Plum Market. I'm the sommelier who's lucky enough to organize all wine events for Plum Market, both in Michigan and at our Chicago store. And I will tell you this, I think, is week 5 of us doing virtual tastings, which have become a little bit of a silver lining in these extraordinary times for us, because we get to keep in touch with you, our beloved guests, and keep a little bit of connection and intimacy using the wonderful vehicle of wine, which my favorite thing about wine, after all is said and done, is it doesn't just dissolve barriers, it ignores them. It just, we're already together. We don't even have to come together. Tonight is the very first virtual tasting we've done, and it's actually a webinar this evening because we cannot see you, though I know you're there. And we've opted to do it this way because we have over, I'm thrilled to say over 80 guests attending this tasting, both from Michigan and from Chicago. So that said, you will not be able to participate vocally, but you can absolutely type in questions as we go along. There's a little Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. The chat room you can use to talk to each other. And this is not an audio. The video is not working. It may be your video is not working, but I think we are in good shape with ourselves seeing each other. Hopefully you can see myself, Veronique, and Laurent. There should be 3 people that you can see on the screen. In a little while, you'll be seeing some beautiful images. So as I said, please feel free to participate by typing questions or comments in your Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. And I will keep an eye on those. And at some point in time, probably, you know, 2/3 of the way through the tasting, I'll start addressing them. I will tell you that this is a very special tasting for me personally, because I was just telling Laurent and Veronique that when I started as a very young sommelier, intensely nervous that I didn't know what I was talking about, and I shouldn't be called a sommelier at all, because I had to educate myself by reading an encyclopedia, which really didn't do the trick at all. I was lucky enough to fall in love, first of all, with white Burgundy. I think it was the first wine whose quality I recognized, and it has a very special spot in my heart. So the fact that we're going to be actually tasting 2 white Burgundies tonight puts a warm smile on my face. In terms of a little bit of housekeeping in addition to the questions, we're going to run about 45 minutes. We might run a little bit longer than that, because having these 2 folks with us is unique opportunity. You don't have to wait for us to cue you to taste. By all means, whether you have one of the wines or all 4, please taste along. And the 4 wines, if you manage to pick all 4 of them up, are the Drouhin-Boss Chablis, the Joseph Drouhin Saint-Laurent, and then 2 Oregon Pinots, Rose Rock and Domaine Drouhin, Drouhin, Oregon. I always say Drouhin, I Americanize it, but Laurent was kind enough to tell me that it rose by any other name, right? So thank you for that. If you want to pick one of the 4, if you happen to have all 4, I highly suggest you sip on the Saint-Laurent, at least to start, because it is irresistibly delicious. And it will make you relax very quickly as a result. It doesn't command your attention, but feel free to go back and forth between all the wines. Chicago, full disclosure, does not have the Chablis for no reason. We weren't being selfish, other than there was a little availability problem, but maybe something to look forward to in the future. So that said, I think I'm going to, in just a second, pass it on to Veronique and Laurent. And we have Veronique Drouhin-Boss with us. She is considered the guardian of the Joseph Drouhin style, and she will tell us what that means. This family does span 2 continents in that they are truly iconic for white and red Burgundy, French Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but actually evolved in a very short period of time as dynamic leaders in Oregon as well. And that story is most interesting. Dominique, and if I get this wrong, you'll correct me, but right after you graduated from the University of Dijon, you staged at some Oregon wineries, which we all know and love, Adelsheim, Bethel Heights, and Erie, notably Erie being a true pioneer in the region, and maybe had something to do with nudging your father, Robert, to invest.
Absolutely.
So I am interested to hear that part of the story. You also have done significant research on Pinot Noir specifically. And she is being kind enough to join us at her 10 p.m. from Bonn, right in the heart of Burgundy. And we're also very lucky to have one of her 3 brothers. So there are 4 Drouhin siblings. And Laurent didn't start out playing in Burgundy. He had some other ventures, but he realized he missed Burgundy, and is now, hopefully I get this correct, you're functioning as both the sales director for the company and export director. In any event, He is the business brains behind why we are lucky enough to have these wines in the United States. And he lives in New York, so that speaks to the fact that you probably like the American spirit a little bit. And I'm happy for that. That said, I think I'm going to pass it off to the two of you to tell us your story and show us some beautiful images of Burgundy and your family. And welcome to you both from Metro Detroit and from Chicago.
Thank you very much, Madeleine.
Thank you, Madeleine. Okay, I'm gonna switch and do the share of it, and you should be able to get that.
Perfect.
Okay,
Bravo.
that works. Good. At least it works. We have a good amount of slides, so we're not going to spend that many minutes on each of them. Otherwise, there'll be we'll go way over time. So we like to play with Veronique. We like to play back and forth. So a little bit of education is always good, just kind of to put the frame of Burgundy in people's mind about where Burgundy is located. You can see that on the map, and then. You have 5 main regions which compose Burgundy. There is the Chablis region with a photo here of Chablis Grand Cru. It's located between Paris and Beaune, approximately 100 miles southeast of Paris. Then you have the famous Côte d'Or, which is the Côte de Nuit in the northern part where all the famous Grand Cru and the famous reds are produced. Then south of the Côte de Nuit, you have the Côte de Beaune, which is pretty much double the size of the Côte de Nuit, and the wines, famous whites, like the Montrachet and all the wines around Bâtard Montrachet, as well as Corton Charlemagne. Then south of the Côte de Beaune, there is the Chalonnais region with wines like Montagny, Rully, Givry. So both white and reds. There's also a good amount of Crémant produced there. And then the Côte Mâconnaise. And the Côte Mâconnaise is the southern part of Burgundy, where wines Mâcon Village, Pouilly-Fuissé, Saint-Véran are mainly produced. And I did not include one in the Beaujolais, but the Beaujolais would be south of the Mâconnais. So
this is a glorious picture. Oh my goodness, I'm stuck on this picture from the Mâconnais.
If I'm correct, unless correct by Veronique, I think this is La Roche de Solutré.
Yes.
Yes, it is. And Veronique, why don't you want to go from there?
Yes, with pleasure. Well, first, hello everyone. Happy to meet you virtually. And hopefully someday we will meet in Oregon and Burgundy. So we wouldn't be here without the man to the right on the screen, Joseph Drouhin, who at the age of 24, and he was from Chablis, had the great idea to come to Beaune. And with his wife, they started, they started a library. And then soon the wine, I guess the wine bug hit him and her, and they started to buy grapes and make wine locally. So they started to be négociants in Beaune. And Joseph passed away in 1918, and that's where the man to the left takes over, his son, our grandfather, Maurice Drouhin, and his wife, Pauline. So this is Joseph, this is Maurice. And Maurice is an extraordinary man that had many hats in his life. And of course, one of them was to take over the management of that little company, but he's also the one who decided to start an estate. And he was residing in Beaune, where we still are today, where Joseph started his little business. This is still today the office of Drouhin. But at the time, to go to the vineyards, you would go with the horse, not with trucks or tractors. So he couldn't buy a vineyard too far away from his winery. And the wine he loved around the city of Beaune was the Clos des Mouches. So he tried and he succeeded in buying a couple acres of Clos des Mouches back in 1921. That is the beginning of the estate.
And
Maurice
now
also,
it is a monopole now, Veronique?
No, it is not a monopole. We are not the only one, but we do own 14 hectares out of 23 of Clos des Mouches. And I think until 1989, we were the only one to make a Clos des Mouches Blanc, because Clos des Mouches is very interesting. It's one of the very rare sites, or we call it climat, in Burgundy, where we both produce a Pinot and a Chardonnay. Where if you think of it, Beaune, Pommard, and Volnay are mainly Pinot Noir producing areas, but in the Clos des Mouches, it does equally well with both varieties.
Well, I've never seen anyone else's, and I have to tell you that Maurice Drouhin looks very much like Maurice Chevalier.
Oh, well, he would be
He
pleased
does.
to.
So forgive my interruption, but
Yes, no, and besides running the little company, Maurice was also the liaison officer to General MacArthur during World War I. So few people know about that. He also was the vice president of the Hospice de Beaune. He was very attached to the hospital. He made a donation of a vineyard to the hospital that every year is sold, and this is why it does exist, the cuvée Maurice Drouhin. That is because Maurice made a donation of Beaune Premier Cru, actually a big part of his estate he gave to the hospital, and he had a stroke in 1957, and that's where our father Robert steps in. So in 1957, Robert takes over the company that it's growing, but it is quite small, and it is Robert who has expanded the estate very much. At the time, it was still possible and affordable to buy vineyards, and that's where he acquired extraordinary vineyards. I find so lucky that we can work with grapes from Musigny, Chambol-Musigny Village, Premier Cru, a bunch of Premier Cru, Musigny, Bonnemar, Griotte-Chambertin, Claude Bèze. Today it would be really impossible or extremely difficult to acquire any vineyard.
Yep. And
yes.
he is the one, we're having the Chablis today, and he is the one who went from Beaune to Chablis in 1968 and invested in Chablis, bought about approximately 100 acres there. But after dealing with local people, trying to narrow down, and because historically he knew that that region used to produce great wines, and there were some sites and then perfectly located vineyards. So he worked in association with a good amount of growers and replanting and putting energy back into the wines of Chablis. So it is thanks to him as well. So we celebrated in 2 years ago, the 50th anniversary of the Domaine in Chablis.
And as I mentioned to you, I'm a little bit behind the times because I've been happily stuck on your Côte de Beaune and Mâconnais wines. So I'm very pleased to appreciate the Chablis. And actually, he had tremendous foresight in terms of international markets, because Chablis is very important right now in terms of the style of Chardonnay being enthusiastically consumed.
Yeah, I would say, if I may step in there, it took a while for the Chablis to get back into people's mind. The reason for that, I mean, Chablis was, and unfortunately is still produced in California by a few people, a few very large companies that I will not name. And it did in the 70s and in the 80s, did a lot of damage to the brand or the name Chablis. For many people, Chablis used to be kind of a cheap wine or a cooking wine, and so it is thanks to the Bureau Interprofessionnel des Vins de Chablis and most of the producers who really fought to get and to put Chablis back in people's mind. And we're talking there, as you mentioned, about the true Chablis, but it's there now. I think that finally the old Chablis or the old attitude that people had against the Chablis is completely gone away. So let's move to the training session.
There you are.
So
there's Veronique. Yes.
Yes, that's me. My grandfather actually took that picture. And Philippe and I were in the Clos des Mouches. This is obviously harvest time. And I like this picture because it's funny. You could almost imagine what Philippe is saying and what I am thinking, because he's looking at the grapes and he became the viticulturist, the vineyard manager for the family. And then as you can see, the mouth is full of grapes and I'm eating the grapes. So I was probably thinking maybe someday I can do something with these grapes. Although I have to say, that I have, as you said, 3 brothers and a father, and then it was only boys working in the salon. So I didn't think I would become a winemaker, because for me it was not something a girl was doing. But when I turned 10 years old, my father hired the first woman winemaker in Burgundy, Laurent.
Yes, that was amazing. And she was the winemaker for a long time, and you worked with her for over 20 years, correct?
Yes, actually over 30 years. She was with
Wow.
us, yes, for 32 years. And I kind of grew up on her side, and she was very instrumental and encouraging me to pursue winemaking studies. That was, yeah.
Okay, let's Madeline, you're the timekeeper there, so.
Oh, we're doing just fine. Don't worry about
good. Okay, well, it's still in the lineup. I mean, above, it's just family photos when we were all young and already drinking wine, even though that wouldn't be politically correct in the country. But we're way below 21 there. So,
and that was your mother pouring the wine. Can you go back to that slide real quick?
Yes, my mother's pouring the wine to Frédéric. And I don't know when that photo was taken, but I would say in the early 80s or something.
Yes, that's an old picture, but I'm glad you're mentioning your mother, because nobody knows so much her, nobody really sees her, but she's actually from a wine family from Belgium. She has a very good palate, and I would say quite often my mother would be the one when we don't know or if we don't agree on the wine. Or I remember my father taking samples back to the house, and then he would say, "Can you try this?" And she would be very quick to, and very, very sharp palate. And she has been helping me every vintage in Oregon since 1988. So I'm really
no
happy.
kidding. What is her name?
Françoise.
Françoise. Thank you. I wasn't aware of that. So we're happy to meet Françoise.
So that's the 4th generation. And we're going to start with Philippe, who's, as it says, the vineyard manager. He's the one running all the estate, both in Burgundy and Oregon. Philippe is the one also, but we'll come back on this a little bit later, who decided to turn everything to organic first as a first step, and then ultimately biodynamic, as a true believer of the respect of Mother Nature and finding natural solutions to natural problems. So he's really the one who changed the approach of viticulture at Joseph Drouhin. For the entire domain. Veronique, who you just met, so live and in photo, covers the winemaking in Burgundy among Jérôme Forbrac and Oregon as well. And I constantly joke by it, when Veronique does a great job, which she does every year, it makes my job much easier, because when the wines are great, you don't really have to work that hard to sell them. So, well, you mentioned about myself. There's no need to spend much time of that. There's one thing missing there, is that I do cover the Caribbean as well. So
yes.
Yeah, I usually tend to have tasting in the Caribbean in January and February. That's where I try to escape. And Frédéric is the president of the company. He's the one running the whole company as the maestro. I like the fact that he names himself a conductor. And by some summary, you have one in the vineyard trying to produce the best grapes as possible, another one in the winery producing the best wines as possible, another one on the market, that would be me, at least North America, and then one controlling, managing, putting all that together and make sure that it works.
Are you on Zoom tastings regularly these days?
I wish, actually, not enough. So they drink all the good stuff in Beaune without telling me.
And the mature stuff too.
And the mature stuff. Veronique, you want to continue?
So I don't know how many of the new generation we will see on these pictures, but this is Frédéric's son, Gabriel. So we're very excited that some of the 5th generation is showing interest. And actually my oldest daughter, Lauren, will officially join us in July. But voila, there she is. So Lauren, some people might not know her, but may know of the wine that we named after her, because she was born in 92, and that was the first vintage of this let's say reserve cuvée from DDO when we named it Cuvée Lorraine. And so Lorraine she has a very, very good palate, and I'm excited that she is going to embrace also the winemaking part, but not only, she will be also traveling And so she's still learning, but that's an exciting.
Oh, you have a great buddy that's going to be with you. And did she study winemaking and enology? Did she focus on that?
Yeah, she started for 5 years. She did a business school, and then she did, like Philippe actually did that. And then for 1 year, for 2 years, she was in Beaune in the Lycée Viticole, studying about grape growing and winemaking. So she's been working all winter in the vineyards, and then she's been already 2 seasons in the cellar, helping Jérôme on the whites, on the reds. And she's doing a daily tasting, because every day, this is, I would say, the best part of my job. My main occupation is to taste the wines. And so she does taste with us every day. And really, that's how you learn.
It's great to see the next generation stepping in.
Ah!
Some others, we used to do that when we were kids. Now the next generation is doing it. We are located right in Beaune. This is, sorry. We're going to go through photos there. That's the Parliament of the Duc de Bourgogne, where the Enothèque and the main entrance to visit the cellars, which are underground, the real historical center of Beaune. So you'll be traveling from pretty much the 13th century to the 16th century, going through, again, that used to be the playgrounds, but we're still using some of those cellars for the élevage.
Didn't you say that you were roller skating through these cellars, if memory serves?
That's true, actually. Yeah. And an anecdote, brief anecdote. I mean, I missed my curve one day, and my foot hit the bottom of a pile of bottles, and that was all bottles. And I remember, even though my father don't remember the vintage, but I broke like 2 bottles of Bonne 69.
Oh no!
And, that was the end of my adventure in the cellars as a roller skater.
Yeah, not a bad year for Burgundy. Pretty bad for Bordeaux, though. You know, so.
That's right.
Right.
This is a 16th century press, and where we did use for the century of Maison Joseph Drouhin in 1980. We used it again for the millennial in 2000, and also in 2005 we did Louvre des Dames, which, well, Veronique, you want to say something? I don't want to be the only one. So.
Yes, but you switched the picture. You should go back to the press. Can say a few, yes. So the press was built in 1561, and it was used, we think, for about 200 years, and then it was abandoned for 200 years, and then the French Revolution came over, and luckily the press was not destroyed, which was most of those presses disappeared. And in 1980, our father wanted to do a special cuvée, and he thought, well, maybe we could use the old press. And we had no idea if that thing would collapse or not. So someone checked on the press, and he said, it is in really good condition, and you have a few things to adjust, but basically you can use it. And so we did. So we did a cuvée of Clos des Mouches Blanc and Rouge, so both in 1980, which was not a particularly exciting vintage. But it was really fun to put ourselves back in the situation of the monks when they were using it. And so no sulfur, no sugar, no electricity, no heating or cooling, just to see how they were making the wines. And I have to say, we have been impressed with both the white and the red. We still have a few bottles of both, and they have been aging extremely well. And then we don't use it every year. It's a lot of work. But 2000 is one of my favorite vintage, where we did a cuvée of Louvre des Dames, just the Chardonnay. And the last time we did use it was 2015. So I'm hoping next year we will celebrate, this year is the 140th anniversary of Drouhin, but next year will be the 100 years of the estate when Maurice bought the Clos des Mouches. So I'm hoping maybe we can use the press again.
Well, it's glorious that it still works. Wonderful.
Okay, next one for it's just back as a little bit of an indication, but it's important that to see the pyramid of the appellation and how small the production of the Grand Cru are versus the regional wine. So that's the 4 levels. So 1% for the Grand Cru, 10% for the Premier Cru, 37 for the villages, and then all the rest is Bourgogne Régional, like Bourgogne Blanc, Bourgogne Rouge, and so on. And in this, keeping that pyramid in mind, I want to go there, and because we're known as a négociant, and we're very proud to be a négociant, but we are also very proud, as Veronique mentioned, to be a propriétaire. And so the 82 hectares, which is a little bit more than 200 acres in Burgundy, 60% of what we own is Premier Cru and Grand Cru.
Well, that's pretty, I mean, that's pretty staggering amount. And were most of these purchased by your father, or did you add significant amounts of vineyard area since, in recent years?
Well, recent years, just a few, but I would say over the course of the past 50 years, whenever we were able to add some an opportunity and paying, I would say, kind of a good price, even though lately it is becoming more and more difficult because the price of land, the price of the vineyards is just staggering and going through the roof.
Well, you must be dealing with growers that you've known, working closely with growers that you've known for a long period of time as well.
Yes, this is something we've tried to do, because you have the option to buy grapes, you have the option to buy juice, you have the option to buy finished wine. And so we have tried to develop a lot of partnership with growers. So I would say all the wines are from estates, but some we own and some we don't own the vineyards. But mostly we work with growers, wonderful people. And some of them it has been for 50 years. And last year we were able to buy a little bit of Beaune Premier Cru, because interestingly, Beaune is not, everyone who wants to buy vineyard focuses mostly on the Côte de Nuit and especially on the Grand Cru, so those are very difficult to acquire. But when there's an opportunity, Beaune Premier Cru make delicious wines, as we know, with the Clos des Mouches. And these are still, you can still find them and you can still afford to buy them. So last year we did buy a little bit of Beaune Premier Cru, so we're very excited.
Yeah, we're not going to spend that much time there, but that the Chablis, as mentioned, is the northern part, and we're now in the time of the year that it can be very, very tricky whenever we have frost. And this is one way. Aspersion is one way to protect and try to protect the bud. And some years it's successful, some other years it goes way below 0 Celsius, and we kind of lose the crop.
It's a fantastic picture. So can you explain very briefly what aspersion is for those of us who don't know?
Veronique, you want?
Yes, so what you see, you can see what is green is the little bud that has started to grow. If we didn't have, and then we have a warning that it could be freezing. So our vineyard manager turned on the water that sprays above the vineyards. And the water will freeze on the little buds, creating a cocoon, and that is actually protecting the little bud from freezing when the sun comes out. And if you did not have it, if it's -2, -3, then it freezes very quickly. In a couple of minutes, it freezes. So this is actually protecting, it's like a shell protecting the little bud. It's very efficient. The problem is you need a good resource of water and you need to have equipment installed. So you can't have it all over the vineyard. So mostly the Grand Cru are protected, but beyond that, it's usually you try to use the candle system.
Well, thank you very much. I know I derailed us a little bit. Keep going, Laurent.
Yeah, well, that's the candle system in Chablis as well to protect it. So this is the Côte d'Or, and you see again back to the percentage. 90% of the domain is Premier Cru and Grand Cru. So it belongs. The 90% belongs to the 11% of the production of the entire Burgundy. So being that that propriétaire as well, I insist. We're proud of being négociant. We're proud of being a propriétaire and having relationship with fabulous producers as well, too, with dealing with. This is Côte de Nuit. This is, Burgundy is all about the terroir. And I know that for some people, whenever you mention or you touch Burgundy, they say it's complicated. We don't really understand. It can be intimidating, but in the meantime, it's easy because I would say basically there is 2 grape varieties, and it's all about, like in real estate, it's all about location, location, location. So you have here Échezeaux, Grands Échezeaux, and Clos Vougeot, and you sometimes a few hundred meters apart, and the wines can be completely different because they're sitting on a hillside, planted on a hillside, and facing for some of them east, southeast. The slope can be more intense in some places than some other. The drainage is different as well. The components of the soil, because, and that's where I wish we had the time to go through there, but because of all the fraction, I mean, you have from one place to another one, the clay would be slightly different. The surface for the limestone would be different as well. And all that has an impact ultimately on what the vines are giving through the berries.
Well, I think you're inspiring everyone to go online and read about Burgundy, because I've spent my career trying, and I think I'm probably still at second grade level, but I remember visiting Burgundy, and it was a revelation to see how close the vineyards were and how small they were. I didn't even have to turn my head, just my eyes, and I saw all the vineyards in Pouligny, so I understood a little bit at that moment.
Yeah. It's a never-ending story, by the way. Mm-hmm. So this is the Côte Chalonnaise. It's just one photo of Reuilly. And why do we say listening to nature? Because Philippe, as I mentioned, and briefly touched that subject a little bit earlier, Philippe moved the vineyards when he took over in the early 80s, and definitely in the mid 80s, he decided to go to organic and ultimately biodynamic. Veronique, you want to jump there?
Yes, so Philippe was, when he went to the school for 1 year, he was so disappointed to be told, if you have this problem, you use this chemical. If you have this other problem, use this chemical. And he said, this is wrong. This is going to be on a long term a problem. And I would say Philippe, like our father, has been a part of the visionary that say we need to find an alternative to how we grow our grapes. And so he looked around, and it is at the same time where Dominique Lafont and Aubert de Villaine and Anne-Claude Leflèvre and the Lafarge family are embracing organic viticulture. And so he turned to the family and he said, I would like that to conduct the estate entirely to organic farming, but I need your okay, because it's not without a risk. We may lose crop, and we did. We don't know how the vines will respond to this decision, because overnight he switched. But we all said, we trust you, do it. And so since 1988, it has been organically farmed, the entire estate, so all the Chablis vineyard plus the Côte d'Or and the Côte Chalonnaise.
That is spectacular. I mean, organic has become a buzzword, certainly, and biodynamic more recently, but I had no idea that you were farming organically for that long. So it's fair to say, especially for such a sizable estate, that you were way ahead of the game.
I think we're, Veronique, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we are the largest domain in Burgundy being officially certified.
Yes, we are.
Bravo.
Yes, but you don't see something to mention. We could use the AB logo, Agriculture Biologique. We don't, Philippe didn't want back then, because he said, I'm not doing this for marketing, I'm doing this because I believe into it. I think for the soil, for the environment, for the water resources are very precious, and a lot of the rivers have been polluted by the chemicals. And so he said, don't use this as a marketing tool. But I think nowadays it is important people know, because we are all aware that eating healthier and drinking healthier is important. So we're not shy telling everyone that we are organically farming. And actually in Oregon, we are moving to organic farming totally also.
And you're certified sustainable in Oregon.
And we are, yes. And so these are a couple lovely shots. The holes that you could see, we use the holes in most of the Grand Cru, not the entire 80 hectares, because that is very slow, it's quite expensive, and you need to find the people to do it. But most of the Grand Cru, just because the holes doesn't compact the soil.
Is there one horse or many horses?
It's many horses. And it's funny, if you come to Burgundy at the time of the plowing, which is from now to almost to end of July, you will see a lot of horses. A lot of horses are back. So our father went from the horses to the tractors, and our generation is going back to the horses.
Bravo.
We still use tractors, but it's really sweet to see the horses back.
So I'm going through I don't know, unless we develop those, but it's
No,
just.
I don't think we have the time because we need to.
Yes, I think we probably need to talk a little quickly about your philosophy of vinification, and then we can just taste some wine.
Yep.
Yes. So vinification, of course, as we spoke about the vineyard, but it starts there. And I find that our role is to reveal the messages that are in the grapes. And we are thrilled in Burgundy. We are very lucky in Burgundy to have, I mean, some people see it as, how do you do this? Because we have so many different little appellations. And that seems confusing to people, but we can't blend the grapes. When they come from Chambolle Amoureuse, they have their own fermenter. When they come from Clos des Mouches, they have their own fermenter. They come from Clos des Chênes. And so our role is to pick at the right time, which is one of the most difficult decisions for a winemaker, is when there's nothing that tells you it's time to pick and there's no obligation to pick or not pick. But once you make your decision, then there's a lot of things that you have to decide depending on the year, like using stems or not. We do. I like to use some of the stems, especially on the Premier Cru and the Grand Cru, and also when it's a good vintage. If it's a vintage that is not so ripe, or if you have some botrytis, then maybe not such a good idea. But
and just to interject for everyone, when we talk about, whole cluster, as you can see on the image, that's related to what Veronique is talking about. And that's very much a decision that's debated with Pinot Noir. So thank you for sharing your view on that.
Yes, so there's a lot of decisions. So do you do some cold soak, meaning do you let the fruits sit before it starts fermenting naturally? We don't inoculate with yeast, so we will let start, but you can control how long you will keep them before they ferment with monitoring the temperature. Anyway, there's a lot of decision, but in the end, there's really three things important. Is we need to respect the vintage, we need to respect the appellation, and we need to respect the style. And the style of Drouhin was set by our, I would say, grandfather. Great-grandfather, I don't know, because I've only one time tasted a wine that he made. It was 1904. But the style of Drouhin could be summarized in a few words, which are elegance, refined, finesse. And that's the beauty of the varieties we are lucky to work with, Pinot and Chardonnay. So there's no need to try and get too much. Sometimes nature will give you more naturally. But I've heard this over and over since I'm a child. But the wines from Burgundy, they have to be elegant and they have to express where they come from. So Clos des Chênes should taste like Clos des Chênes. An Amoureuse should be Musigny, should taste like Musigny.
Well, and you can probably tell the difference blind, but, I will have to take another life to be able to do that. I envy your intimacy with the wines. This is a gorgeous shot. And where are we? Are we in Bonn here? Or
no,
we Oregon?
We traveled 10,000 kilometers to to Oregon. So we crossed France, the Atlantic Ocean, all of the US, and we are actually we are in Rose Rock, so the chapter.
This shot is Rose Rock. Okay.
Yeah, this picture is taken at Rose Rock, the new vineyard we bought in 2013. So I don't know if you want me to talk about Oregon now, or
yes, please. Here we are. If we could, and we need to start tasting pretty soon.
Yep,
so you can do a slightly short version of it. I'm sorry to push you slightly.
Very quickly about our adventure, which started in 1987 when we bought the land. So you see this picture. Imagine just the trees and no vineyards, no winery. It was just a beautiful farming land. And we bought that site in 87 on the advice of David Adelsheim and David Lett, Papa Pinot, who were the wonderful families that I was lucky to work with in 86. And the reason we chose Oregon was, well, we actually didn't choose to go to Oregon. It's more the people from Oregon who were very encouraging to my father and say, Robert, you should try and make wine in Oregon. And I have to say that 33 years ago, to believe that Oregon was a great place for Pinot was special. Not many people believed into Oregon as being a future great place for Pinot. But anyway, we buy this land in 87, and from there my dad says we need to make wine. And I said, Dad, we have no vineyards, we have no winery, and we have no equipment. And he said, well, if you're willing to make the wine, we will buy grapes, we will bring equipment, and we will find a place to make it. And so that's what we did in 88, so our first vintage in 1988. And we really were so happily surprised with the result. The big surprise for us is the soil is so different from Burgundy. So we spoke about the terroir. Mm-hmm. We have the classic limestone, marl, and multiple type of clays in Burgundy. Oregon has volcanic soil, so really different from Burgundy. But the climate is very similar. So we are in a cool climate. And Pinot is very sensitive to climate. Doesn't like too much heat or too much cold. And so the choice of Oregon, I think, was smart. There's not so many places on the planet where that variety is happily growing. And certainly Oregon is one of them. So you see the winery, we could design a winery that we would dream of, that we could not build in Burgundy, because you have to be on the valley floor, you have to be in the villages, you can't build anything in the vineyards, it's forbidden. In Oregon, we had the option to put the winery wherever we wanted. So we chose to do a gravity flow winery, and that little drawing that the architect, Animanch, kindly gave me, kind of explains, we bring the fruit to the first level, crush them there, they go to the fermenters, which are the rounds, things that you can see here, and then we press at that level and it goes to the barrels, and then the barrels goes to the bottling line, and then you see the little dreyfusage be taking the wine.
This is a spectacular drawing, and can you just touch on why gravity flow is important in wine production?
Pinot, maybe not all grape varieties do need it's ideal to have gravity flow probably for most of the grapes, but Pinot is so fragile. It's a very sensitive variety, so you try to handle them as little as possible. So if you gravity flow, you use less pumps, which is the idea with this system. Basically, is everything goes one level to the other one without using pumps. You use them for pumping over, you use them for the final blending, but even my racking, I do it by gravity. And it's a very gentle way. I'm not afraid of oxygen at all for the wine, but I don't like to mix them too much in pumps.
No, this is it integrates so beautifully into the landscape as well.
Site is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I love going there. I don't go there enough, unfortunately, but this is indeed, it's magic, honestly. No matter what the weather, obviously, if the weather is nice, but this is magic, being able to enjoy and to see the spirit of the family that transpires into the wines from Oregon. It's there.
So one word on this logo, and yes, and by the way, the view from the winery is spectacular, because you can see Mount Hood, that's the volcano, which is right in front of the winery. And so that little logo, some people may wonder what LIVE means, L-I-V-E, and you see at the bottom, low input viticulture and enology. So Madeleine, that's what you were referring to. We are certified LIVE in vineyards and the winery. And it's very
and those must be lavender, a lavender field, I would well imagine.
These are lavenders, yes.
Yeah, gorgeous.
The bees love it.
So the next picture I want to ask, is that Françoise?
Yes.
Oh, so wonderful.
So the next picture to the right, you see Philippe, who's very tall, and you see my mother, and I don't know if you can see my father. He's there too, but I can't see him because there's little pictures that hiding me. This is a funny picture. I asked Philippe if I could buy a press. I'm using a basket press, which is a great press because, again, it respects the Pinot very much. And the first time we use it, when you have done pressing, there's a big cake that comes out. So it's all the juice is gone, and you have the solid parts.
Oh, so you have birthday candles on there. I just saw.
Right.
That.
So we put birthday candles, and we asked we said to my parents, "Come, we have a surprise for you." Anyway, it was kind of blessing the press the first time we use it.
That's fantastic. So to that point, we should raise a glass of Chablis and talk about it, correct? But thank you for giving us a quick version about what makes the name Drouhin so special on 2 continents. But I've been sitting here playing with Chablis because the level in my glass is going down.
Well, the wines of Chablis, I mean, you're in the northern part, so it's definitely a cool climate. It's sitting on a rock, which is called, on a sword, sorry, which is called the Quiméridien. So it's basically limestone and chalk and fossilized oyster shells as well. It's a very poor soil when you walk there, and it cracks under your feet when you walk in the vineyard. Almost the shells, you can feel them. For the Chablis, that wine in particular, this wine does not see oak at all. I mean, it is 100% still fermented. We use the oak to reveal and to deliver the message whenever the wine has the structure to integrate a little bit of barrel age. But we believe that in Chablis, first of all, the use of new oak is not done in any of our Chablis all the way to the Grand Cru. But for that specific Chablis AC, you want it crisp, you want refreshing. It's again slightly cool climate, very poor soil. You want it zippy and citrusy, and if
it's actually kind of crunchy, if I can interject.
That's a good word. It's
mouthfeel of Chablis is so special, and it's in this wine. You know, but people like me, sommeliers, are always talking about this awful term called minerality. And one of my master sommelier colleagues was a geologist, Wayne Belding, and he would just say, have you ever licked a rock? It doesn't taste like anything, which is true. But I think there's something that's non-fruity that you can really smell, but in this particular wine, really taste. And it comes across a little salty almost, a sense of inorganic earth. And I think it's just spectacular. It gives it an edginess that is a surprise.
The saltiness, I like it to say also to describe it as salinity, which is kind of you tweak there a little bit, but it's every sip is a call for another one, honestly, because it cleans the palate, but on a very charming, pleasant way, and with lots and lots of energy on it. And with seafood, I mean, I love this wine with oysters. I believe this is one of the greatest pairing you can have with this wine. Obviously, just as an aperitif. I'm a golf addict, so I love this wine on the golf course, having a sip. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a true representation of what Chablis can produce at the Chablis AC level.
And the term Vaudon comes from the estate, correct? Moulin de Vaudon.
It's a little water mill that my father purchased in 1971, and it's located in the village of Chissé, which is a mile from the village of Chablis, and the name of that water mill was the Moulin de Vaudon. So we used that Vaudon name to name the wines of the domain.
Lovely, beautiful expression of Chardonnay from a very specific terroir. It almost feels very lightly tannic. It's wonderful. It's very palate cleansing. And then we're going to the easy peasy, delicious Saint-Véran.
Veronique, you want to talk about it, or you want?
Yes, no, with pleasure. So it's all, I always love to do this, have the Chablis and then move to the south to the Saint-Véran, because it's the same grape variety that is made the same way, and yet they couldn't be more different. And you have the same vintage. By the way, it's a very lovely vintage. 2018 is delicious, white and red. You can't go wrong with that, with the vintage. So Saint-Véran, we're in the southern part of Burgundy at the border of the Beaujolais region. And Saint-Véran is the neighbor of a more well-known appellation called Puy-Fuissé. But Saint-Véran, we have always been very excited with this region. So it's again a wine that does not see oak. We pick the grapes, we press the grapes, we get the juice will settle, then we rack it to a stainless steel tank, and it will ferment. And then we will taste every other week, we will taste the wine, and then we decide when to put it in the bottle. So
you're not even using neutral oak on this, correct?
No, we are not. No, it doesn't see oak at all. Not even neutral oak, no.
I have to say, if I can just interject a tiny little bit of practicality into this conversation, what always personally stuns me about this wine, and I've tasted it over, I don't know, 10 vintages on and off. I'm never disappointed. It reflects the vintage, but I find when I remember what it costs, a real sense of warmth and appreciation. All those of you who have purchased this wine know that in both markets it comes in, I believe, at under $20, if you don't mind my mentioning money for a moment. And I think getting a white Burgundy of this quality of fruit at that price point is special, because I think quite often Burgundy can be not as accessible as we'd love it to be. So thank you for making this wine. And the style is very, very friendly. You know, it's interesting, the acidity, I don't know how it is compared to the Chablis, but the perception of it is much softer.
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, because Chablis, as Laurent said, you are in the northern part, so we're actually very close to Champagne in Chablis, and the Saint-Véran region is much warmer. You're to the door of Lyon, and so that is why the grapes don't react the same. The soil is also different. And I saw someone, and it's a good point, saying, I see this in screw cap. We do screw cap for some of our wines. Chablis, you would find some Chablis, you would find some Saint-Véran. We do some aligoté also with screw cap. The La Forêt, blanc and rouge, and it depends on the markets. France, forget it. Nobody wants it.
Right.
In
Portugal,
general,
forget it, because they make corks there. But you know, bravo to you for doing this, because the screw caps, the premium ones that are for wine that we call Stelvin closures, they are not a mark of a lesser wine. And I think it's so important for consumers to understand that. It's a decision. And in that respect, we actually, as sommeliers, have New Zealand to thank. When they, when they went almost 100% to screw caps or closures. But I'm very happy to see you making the decision to use it on some of your wines. Thank you.
Yeah, we do, because you know the resources of corks is limited, and so it's very good to have good alternative closure. And now we don't use screw cap on all our wines, and the Grand Cru still have natural corks, the Premier Cru, the Clos des Mouches, and so on. But I think it was a smart move for whoever wants them and likes them to go with screw cap. Yeah.
So Dave, we get to go to red wine.
Now, just before we go to the red wine, just briefly on what I like about having the Saint-Véran and the Chablis, not only side by side, but being able to ultimately buy one of those. If you try the Chablis and you don't like it, because I've seen people saying, it's too dry, it's too straightforward. And I said, well, great, I have another wine for you, and that would be the Saint-Véran, because going all the way south, the brightness is there, but there is a little bit more of a roundness and softness in the wine. So for some palates, it is maybe perceived as being less aggressive, less dry, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, same grape variety, same region, two different locations, and same producer, and you being able to...
And a different mouthfeel. And actually, a very good question came up. Is there a difference in the amount of lees contact that the Saint-Véran gets as opposed to the Chablis? Does that impact the mouthfeel, Veronique? Or is it simply the microclimate and the ripeness?
No, the lees contact is the same, but what could be different is the malolactic fermentation. So the primary fermentation, obviously, we go totally dry. Depending on the vintage, usually Chablis, we always go 100% malo because the acidity is naturally quite high. Right. In the Saint-Véran, we can play with that, and we do. So if it's a really warm year, we may block the malolactic before it's 100% finished. So that's our little room to play for, keeping a little bit of vibrancy. I love it in the Chablis, but I also like it in all the wines, but I like to have a little bit of that.
And I will remind everyone, the Saint-Véran drinks great without food. It'll do just fine at the table as well. But if you need to soften that perception of acidity in the Chablis, all you need to do is pair it with something. And that includes wines that are foods that are tart, because it will soften the perception of acidity in the wine. Like you were talking about oysters with a squeeze of lemon on them will do the trick, absolutely.
Yep.
Here we are. Rosie.
There we are. Well, I leave Veronique regarding the two Oregon wine, because every time I learn something, and she is the mother of those two wines, so it's perfect.
Well, I don't know, Madeline, if you want me to talk
I
about.
think if you can just tell us very briefly, you know, this is Eola Amity Hills, how this is perhaps different than your home property of Dundee Hills, and I will maybe describe what I'm perceiving after you say that. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. So we are based. DDO is in the Dundee Hills area, and we've been there for until 2013. We were only in Dundee, but we had bought fruit from Rose Rock because Rose Rock was a property owned by CalPERS, pension plan from California, and they had extremely well planted this site, and they were selling the grapes to maybe 20 different producers. But at some point, they decided to sell the property. And the fruit I was buying from Rose Rock was for Cloudline. I don't know if you know this Pinot Noir that I...
Oh, yes. And by the way, note to everyone out there, best value in Pinot Noir in the New World, arguably, and I'm not kidding. So that's done by this lady, too. It's got her thumbprint on it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So my best wine, my best fruit was from this site, was from Rose Rock. So when we heard that it was for sale with Philippe and my father, we thought, it's a shame we're going to lose this supply. And my father said, well, maybe we should try and buy it. I said, well, Dad, it's way too big. I don't have the space to make the wine here. I said, well, we can manage. Maybe we'll find a way to do it. So we made an offer, and I have to say our offer was not the best. And people were wanted kind of us to buy it. And so we made another one that was a little bit better. Anyway, by the Christmas of 2013, we ended up being the propriétaire of Rose Rock. And the property is exactly the same size as the original property, DDO, 45 hectares of Pinot, and there's 4 of Chardonnay. So the map, you can see what is in yellow is the Chardonnay blocks. And by the way, Eola Amity Hills for Chardonnay is super, super exciting.
Oh, I didn't know that, though. I have to say, I adore the Rose Rock Chardonnay and was really torn, and I almost nudged you to show it today. But everyone who's listening, don't cheat yourself out of the Rose Rock Chardonnay. It's an absolutely glorious Oregon Chard, very well integrated, and I hadn't intellectualized that is Eola Amity Hills Chardonnay fruit, right?
And so something to know about this place is Eola Amity Hill is a cooler area than Dundee. It is in what we call the Van Duzer corridor, and there's actually a new AVA called Van Duzer now, but it is within that area. And so the site gets this cold air running to this little valley, and it makes, for me, it makes the grapes ripen a little bit later, which is great because I don't have to pick everything at the same time. They ripen slower. So it does show into the wine. They have a different texture, they're different composition of juice. Usually the acidity is a little bit higher, but the soil is also slightly different. DDO is entirely Jory. Jory is a type of basalt, and Rose Rock is also Jory, but we also have Nekaya, so there's more stones, more pebbles to be found in Rose Rock. Now the name, when we bought the property, it was...
thank you. I was going to ask you about that.
Yes, because I adore my little rose on the label. The name was given to the site. We did not name it. It was called Rose Rock. For the Pinot, we did a little rose, and for the Chardonnay, we did a little rock. And for the equivalent of Cuvée Lorraine at Rose Rock, which is called Cuvée Zéphirine, that is the name of the rose. So for anyone who likes gardens and roses, I encourage you to Google Zéphirine. And what is interesting, this rose was named for a girl that lived in the 1870s, but her last name was Drouhin. So the rose is actually called Drouhin.
Yep, it is a true.
So we thought it was the most appropriate name for the wine. Zéphirine is a selection of the best, let's say the best blocks, the best lots of Rose Rock. And so of course it's a smaller production, very similar to Cuvée Lorraine of DDO. Anyway, different site, different type of soil, different type of wines. Rose Rock tends to have a lovely texture, a very, very fragrant nose. And Dundee is maybe a little more like Chambol, a little more subtle, very delicate, very refined.
Well, if you don't mind my interjecting quickly before we we talk about DDO, I think the acidity on that Rose Rock Pinot is just spectacular because, and just to remind us all, acidity is perceived on the sides of the palate. So even though mid-palate, which is my current obsession, when I just hold the wine on the palate, it has this wonderful concentration of red and blue fruits, and it's just luscious, but then it finishes so uplifting and mouth-watering. It's positively mouth-watering, and I think as easy drinking as it is at this moment, if one were to forget it for a few years, it would simply reward you with some more layers. But it speaks, it's a good ambassador for this this appellation in the Willamette Valley.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Of the record, because we've been lucky to make wine for more than 30 years. My last year was my 32nd vintage in Oregon. I am so pleased that I can go back to every vintage since 1988 and they still drink well.
Bravo.
So we didn't know back then how long they would age, but it's very nice to see they do have great aging potential. And this is the view of the property in Dundee of DDO. To the left of that picture would be Domaine Drouhin. To the right would be Archery Summit. To the south, at the bottom would be Irie. And so this is a very nice neighborhood. It's truly a superb site for Pinot, and David Led was so inspired to go and plant vines.
So what do we have? We have Irie, we have Domaine Drouhin, and what was the other one?
Archery Summit.
And Archery Summit. So it's
You also have Sokol Blossa, who is a little bit, is very close also. We see it from the winery. And if we would go on the other side, we would find Erath and Lang, and there's a lot of, and Cameron. There's a lot of wineries on the other side. So it's still in the Dundee Hills. So this is the Pinot. That is the reason we went there. This is the main cuvée I produce. I have the cuvée Laurent. I have a couple specials, which I call Édition Limitée. But the Pinot that we are tasting is that is the reason we went there. And what I adore with the Pinot, the expression of the Pinot there, is the texture. They're so elegant and so refined, and yet again, it's not the typical limestone that I'm used to in Burgundy. So that was the big surprise. So to see that the wines age well and they grow on such a different terroir is, and it has been over the years, different vintages. Not the vintages are not the same year after year, but you do find
that's the breed of a Grande Région, or a region that has potential for great wines. I mean, if the wine can age, it's definitely an indication that it is a good site or an overall good combination from the subsoil all the way to the climate and the exposure for great wines.
And you know, this wine, if you don't mind my innocently mentioning the mouthfeel difference between the Rose Rock and this, it's very interesting because Pinot tannins are gentle, but this is a little more drying, just a little more, but you can still taste the wine fully through the tannins, and it's remarkably well balanced for its youth. It seems to me to be, I want to use the word elegant, because elegant to me means complete. There's something round about this Pinot, even at this moment. Can you kindly tell us briefly, do we need to be concerned about Oregon vintages versus Burgundy vintages? Is there as much variation, or can we, not focus on it?
There's a little less variation in Oregon than is in Burgundy, I have to say. We had 5 years in a row, very similar vintages from 14 to 18. They were very in a kind of a warmer type of vintages. And then we got 19, which is cooler. And then before 2012, I did see more variation than I see now. So maybe global warming is also affecting Oregon. But the vintages even in Burgundy, if you think of it, the 60s were very difficult. The 70s, some vintages were really good, but most of them were not easy. Then the 70s, same. And then came the 80s, and then the mid 80s, then we start to see a whole collection of vintages. So our generation is having it an easier time than what my father was had to deal with. We don't chaptalize anymore in Burgundy. It's very, it is changing. We can't deny that. So Oregon,
you know, and I will actually interject to remind all of us that for me, and I'm supposed to know this, having worked the floor for so many years. Here you are, all of you, fourth and fifth generation, yes. So we get to look forward to what Gabrielle and Laurent are going to do. And there's another young gentleman there.
That's my son. That's Arthur. For those who know the Chardonnay from Didio, Cuvée Arthur.
Oh, yes, Cuvée. We say Arthur, but Arthur. But it's wonderful seeing the whole family together. What I was going to say as a parting shot is that I don't worry too much about vintages. What to me is the greatest comfort and privilege as someone in the business is to know that there is a producer that represents integrity across all vintages and all wines, and frankly, price points. And I say this from my heart that the Drouhin family represents that. And I think we can buy your wines with confidence from either side of the Atlantic and any vintage. I will tell everyone who's been listening patiently, because we're well over an hour, but you can't say this wasn't enthralling, that we have been recording this, and hopefully we'll tuck it on our website if you'd like to revisit it. There were several questions we couldn't address because they were a little complex, particularly with questions regarding biodynamic viticulture and some decisions that Philippe is currently making. But what I will do is, if there are just a handful of them, I might forward them to you, Laurent and Veronique, and if you'd be kind enough to give short answers, I'll pass that along to our guests. But whether you tasted one wine or four tonight, I think you can understand my feeling about the dependable excellence of this family's wines. And I hope I'm going to be around for the next 20 years so I can see what happens and where you go next. You know, who knows? But please know that Metro Detroit and Chicago was thrilled to have your company and to invest this time and to make it personal for us. I can't thank you enough. So merci beaucoup. That's the extent of my French. I have a good French accent.
Well, thank you, Madeleine, for the very kind words. And I would like to thank, the team at Plum, obviously, and not forgetting there in the back, Bob Verdon from Dreyfus HB, as well as Mark Kalashnik from Dreyfus, who you know very well, Madeleine. So,
and also our co-founder and co-owner, Mark Jonah, who you've met once, who is a huge fan of Drouhin and has been lucky enough to visit. I have to make it to both Oregon and to Burgundy to visit you. So I'm enjoying the wines in a virtual way. But Mark sends his warm hello. And if anyone wants to follow up, these wines are currently available at all Plum markets in both markets. Well, all Plum markets in both Chicago and Michigan, with the exception of the Chablis, but we'll try to make that right for Chicago. And next week, we're going to revert to our normal little cozy, chatty 3-pack, both in Michigan and Chicago. But you now have 80 plus fans forever and their friends. So merci. And everyone have a wonderful, wonderful evening. And you get to maybe go to sleep now, Veronique, I think. It must be past 11 o'clock there.
Oh, don't worry. It's okay. No, thank you very much. You know, it's great. It's fun to make the wine, but it's even better to know they are going to be enjoyed by friends. So cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers to all. Okay.